What's up, my wizards? It's Dev from Mtg. We like magic, and as I upload this, Core Set 2019 is officially legal to play in paper. So to celebrate, I figured I'd bring you a bunch of stuff you've been asking for, all rolled up into one. Today's deck is centered around a combo that everyone's been talking about, and it's really low budget. Been getting a lot of that in my comment section lately. And just to throw you an extra bone, it's also rotation proof. So you buy this thing now, you can play it for well over a year. So there's a lot of cool stuff about this deck. Let's get to talking about Arcane Contract.
Yo, I'm sorting through some heinous haters like a pooper scooper. Jada's trying to take my life like a Koopa Trooper. I'm Double Mario, that means I'm super. And I'm freaking dangerous like a Chupa Cabre.
And the music intros are back. That's something else a lot of you have been asking me for, so there you go. But in any case, alternate win conditions. The infamous alternate win condition. A lot of players love them. Some players actually hate them. And they're almost always universally pretty bad. They almost never work out, but as they always say every time we see a new one, this one might actually work this time. What we're trying to basically do here is win off of Liliana's contract. And to do that, we're going to do what any good combo deck does and just cheat. We're going to cheat and play Arcane Adaptation and just name demons when it hits the battlefield. Pretty slick, right? As far as the numbers go, we're going to play 4 contracts and 3 adaptations, mostly because adaptation is bad. It doesn't do anything at all outside of just set all of our creatures to demon. Contract is definitely the better card because it at least does something. Signing on the dotted line gives us 4 cards at a pretty hefty cost that we won't always be able to pay, but 4 cards is a lot of cards. That'll help us draw in to adaptation if we don't already have it, and it'll help us draw into more creatures to actually fulfill the requirements. Not to mention that, like, against control decks and other decks where you don't really care about your life total too much, just drawing 4 cards is a huge refill that might win you the game, even if you don't fulfill the alternate win condition requirements. It'll just draw you a bunch of creatures. We're forced to play a bunch of creatures in this deck because of how this combo works. So sometimes this will just draw you into 2 or 3 creatures and just help you win the game on the spot. It's a huge refill against slower decks, and that matters. But like I just said, we got to play a bunch of creatures in the deck to actually make good on our part of the contract. Not only do we need 4 creatures out at the same time, which is harder than it sounds, they also have to have different names. Remember, the contract stipulates that. So not only do we have to play a bunch of creatures in the deck, the whole rest of the deck, aside from the combo, has to be creatures. But we also can't play a whole bunch of 4-ofs here. They all have to have different names if we're going to actually fulfill the requirements of the contract. So that means we're going to play a bunch of 2s and 3s. Presents an interesting problem to the brewer, but let me show you how we approached it. Now, in order to execute properly, we have to play some 1-drops, and I wasn't sure that 1-drops were the right path when I started this deck, but the deck really wants to curve out if it's going to win as fast as it wants to. The deck is capable of winning on turn 6 during your upkeep, but in order to do that, you have to play 1-drop, 2-drop, Arcane Adaptation. Then turn 4, you have to get 2 creatures somehow. Then Liliana's Contract on turn 5. All those creatures also have to survive, which is not a guarantee, of course, by any stretch of the imagination. But if you're going to win as quickly as possible, you have to play some 1-drops, both so that you get a drop on turn 1 and so that you can more easily play multiple creatures on subsequent turns. So 1-drops are an integral part of the plan. So to that end, we're going to play 3 copies of Diregraph Ghoul and 3 copies of Vicious Conquistador. Now, a major advantage of both of these 1-drops is that neither of them die to Goblin Chain Whirler, which is a real consideration. Again, we want to have the requisite number of creatures out by the time Contract actually hits the board, and it really helps to have creatures that don't lose value when they plunk down a Chain Whirler. But aside from even that, these are both relatively aggressive creatures that can get in fast, early damage against controlled decks. This deck can't always hope to win off of Contract plus Adaptation, especially against control where it can counter key plays like that. So against some decks, since we have to play a bunch of creatures anyway, we may as well play aggressively and just try to get in a bunch of early damage and maybe even finish the game by attacking. Now, the deck plays a couple more 2-drops than you'd normally see, and that's because not only do we want a 2-drop, but again, we want to be able to get 2 creatures on turn 4, and having a bunch of 2-drops helps us do that. Now, luckily, most of our 2-drops also help with our plan in some way or another. So let me start by showing you 3 copies of Omen Speaker, 2 copies of Dusk Legion Zealot, and 2 copies of Seeker's Squire, because they all fulfill a similar role. Now, it's been a little while since it's been in Standard, but Omi's still my homie. Omen Speaker allows us to see 2 cards on turn 2, which is really important for a combo deck. You know, never forget that we're trying to assemble a combo here, even though we've got a buttload of creatures in this deck. We're still looking for specific cards. Omen Speaker is a great way of blasting through unnecessary cards or even helping us get, you know, our 3rd or 4th land if we haven't drawn them yet. And it blocks pretty well against aggro. It's got a relatively big butt for the early game, especially for it having such a desirable enter the battlefield trigger. Always liked Omen Speaker, good to have back, especially in a combo deck that needs creatures anyway. Omen Speaker is amazing. As far as Seeker's Squire and Dust Legion Zealot, I know that Zealot dies to Chainwhirler, but it's still worth a raw card at the end of that exchange. You know, you still got to see another card and actually put it into your hand. Unlike Omen Speaker or Seeker's Squire, unless that card is a land. And this is, you know, Seeker's Squire. Not only does it not die to Chainwhirler, unlike Dust Legion Zealot, but it also helps you see more cards. You know, sometimes if you see a Liliana's Contract, you'll elect to keep that on top. But other times, it'll help you draw into those, you know, 3rd and 4th lands that you need to actually put the combo down in the first place. But we're not quite done with 2 drops. I'm also playing 3 copies of Kitesail Freebooter and 4 copies of Graveyard Marshal. Well, Boots is great on turn 2. This allows us to get pieces out of our opponent's hand that would disrupt the combo, whether they're, you know, counter spells or even removal pieces that zap our creatures. We don't want that either. So we can get all manner of nasty stuff out of our opponent's hand with a Kitesail Freebooter as early as turn 2. That's really important to be able to do. So I want at least 3 main deck copies of that. But Graveyard Marshal is one of the rare 4-ofs in this deck because it does everything. It trades up pretty well in combat. It comes down really early. It's an aggressive creature, which is pretty good. Depending, you know, it's kind of our plan B to be aggressive again here. So the plan of Diregraph Ghoul into Graveyard Marshal in the early game is actually not a bad plan against control decks. And again, against control decks, this allows us to pester them by pulling creatures out of our graveyard and getting 2/2 zombie tokens, which is also decent, by the way, for executing our combo plan, because this puts another differently named creature onto the battlefield. So Graveyard Marshal does literally everything that we want. I think it's worth a 4-of. Get ready to see a lot of this card in the upcoming Standard. At least in my deck techs, I have been very impressed by this card in the lab so far. But into the 3 drops here, we're going to play 3 copies of Aviation Pioneer because this is awesome. It puts out 2 differently named creatures at the same time for the cost of 1. And this is the most obvious way to get 2 creatures on turn 4 leading up to a contract on turn 5. There's just nothing wrong with this creature, and it provides a flyer to help block huge stuff in the air and extend the game until we can actually get the combo down. So I love Pioneer. We should play at least 3 copies. I actually am playing another 4-of in this deck, and that's Exclusion Mage. This thing is awesome. It's like a fixed Reflector Mage, which I'm not sure needed fixing, but still undeniable that the card is powerful. It's just a really good tool for getting tempo. You know, taking your opponent's turn 2 or turn 3 away from them is a really good tool for this deck where we're just trying to stave them off until we actually get to our combo. And it puts a body on the battlefield that counts towards the combo. So Exclusion Mage is just amazing. We're going to play all 4 of this. But to finish it off, we're going to play 2 copies of Chupa Chupacabra right there. Just a couple here. I actually started off with 4 copies in the main deck, but it quickly became clear that we want to play more than 1 creature on turn 4 whenever we possibly can, but we're still going to want Chupacabra's ability in the deck. This is just ridiculous, right? This is another way of getting great tempo back from your opponent, and honestly, the combination of turn 3 Exclusion Mage into turn 4 Ravenous Chupacabra is really, really powerful in and of itself. Not only will that help, you know, stall the game out for as long as we needed to, but it's just a really powerful turn sequence. So, it's just, I love the 2 cards together, and I'm definitely going to play at least a couple of copies of Chupacabra. Again, I don't want 3 or 4 here, but it's still a really, really just good card in terms of raw power. Now we're playing 24 lands in the deck, which may look a land light to some eyes because the most important card in the deck is a 5-drop. I understand that, but don't forget we've got Omen Speaker, Dust Legion Zealot, Seeker's Squire, all there at 2 mana to help us draw into those 3rd, 4th, 5th lands to help us actually get to pull off the combo. So I'm not too worried about it. I think we can cut a land considering we see a lot of cards in the early game. Now here's our board right here, and you'll note that the only non-creature card in the sideboard is Negate. We are going to run 4 copies, but that's where it ends. We can't afford to take out a bunch of creatures and completely ruin our plan. And, you know, we're playing 29 creatures in the deck. So the thing is, if we take out 4 of them, side in 4 negates, we still have 25 creatures. That's enough to make our plan work, especially in a longer game. I want Negate in there so that we can force through not only creatures, but obviously combo pieces when we have to in the late game. Aside from that, we do have some other tools against control, though. We've got another copy of Kitesail Freebooter to help disrupt, but we've also got Mystic Archaeologist, which is an all-star in long games. This can come down early against control and get damage in if you want to, but it's much better in the late game, or just gets you fistfuls of card advantage, helps you draw into your combo, or just helps you draw into more creatures to overwhelm them. Every turn this stays on the board increases your win percentage in that game against control by an awful lot, because you're just crushing them in the card advantage game. Archaeologist is also great to rip off the top late because it can come down and you'll still have enough mana left to actually use its ability. Even if they have a removal spell for it, you'll still be guaranteed some value out of it, and that's important. We're also going to play Knight of Malice because we want our creatures to stick around, and against decks that play planes and white permanents and such, this is very good at sticking around. You know, it can't be sealed away or cast out or Ixalan's Binding or whatever, so it's awesome against those decks, and it's a pretty decent aggressive early game creature against them too. Aside from that, though, against aggro, we've got another copy of Ravenous Chupacabra, and we've got 4 copies of Plague Mare, which is not, repeat not, Goblin Chain Whirler. Just a big difference there, but this will come in against the aggro decks, ironically the Goblin Chain Whirler decks, because this will kill all of their early stuff. Bomat Couriers, not Soulscar Mages, but at least Bomat Couriers and Earthshaker Kinras, and a bunch of other stuff they might be playing. Plus, if you do come up against, again, white decks, they will often, especially the aggressive ones, play some 1 toughness dudes on the lower end of the curve, and Plague Mare can be really, really effective, again, against any deck with planes in it. I really wanted the horse in the main deck, and it was at the beginning of all of this, but again, it's just so not Goblin Chain Whirler, and the 3-drop slot was really clogged up. You could play this in the main deck over Aviation Pioneer if you wanted to. You'd have a pretty good removal suite at the top end of your curve, you know, Exclusion Mage, Plague Mare, Ravenous Chupacabra. If Mono Red is a problem in your area, you might want to consider doing that, but honestly, the only decks I found it good against were very, very fast aggro decks. Unless it can 2-for-1 for you, I just don't like it that much, so I put it in the sideboard. Now here are our power rankings right here. Final score of 60 points, which may be the lowest score so far, but it's not actually bad for a budget deck, and this deck is really budget. It sits right around $40 on TCG Player right now, which is a steal. That is the lowest budget deck that I've done in a while, and this thing actually can pull off games a good percentage of the time. You know, it's a great F&M deck because it doesn't cost anything. You can play it for freaking ever at this point, and you actually get to play a lot of good value creatures. A lot of our early game creatures get us value in the form of either seeing more cards or actually drawing more cards, or, you know, in terms of Graveyard Marshal, creating value out of cards in our graveyard. We get a lot of value off of them in that way. And our later creatures like Exclusion Mage or Ravenous Chupacabra, they give us more value in the form of different kinds of removal. So, you know, even outside of the fact that we're a janky combo deck, and we admittedly are, we still play a lot of relatively powerful creatures that provide good value. I mean, seriously, when you go down the deck list, every creature in the deck provides some kind of cool value for you, you know, like Kitesail Freebooter, Aviation Pioneer. Didn't mention them in the list a second ago, but they're still both 2-for-1s in their own kind of way, you know. Just every creature in the deck is a really good way of getting value, and that's awesome, considering, yeah, we've got the janky combo and all that, but we can also just win off of getting value, grinding damage in, getting early damage in, plus getting late damage off of stuff like Graveyard Marshal, just getting a bunch of creatures back. There's a bunch of ways that we can just attack for damage in this deck too. So that's the mark usually of a good alternate win condition deck, is more than one way to win other than just fulfilling the alternate win condition. Luckily, this deck makes us play a bunch of creatures, and again, to our luck, we've got a bunch of good value creatures in specifically this color combination. So again, there were times that I won in the lab off of Contract plus Adaptation, but there were far more times that I won off of just, you know, grinding out value and getting in long game damage. So this deck can do both. And if you're interested in trying this thing out, and I hope you are, this is a fun F&M deck, all you got to do is click the first link in the description, and that'll take you over to the deck list on TCG Player. From there, you can just view the deck list if you want to, or you can buy it outright from them for the lowest price on the dang interwebs, and I did sign a contract with them, but I'm not contractually obligated to say that. I just say it because it's true. There's a bunch of other websites this deck will cost you $50, $60, or more dollars on, but on TCG Player, it's only right around $40 to buy it from their vendors. So if you're interested in playing the deck, click the first link in the description. And if you want to do some low-effort stuff to give me a boost on your way out the door, just click the like button down there. That helps me more than you can imagine. You can also sub if this is your first time seeing me, or if you just have seen me a bunch and you just haven't subbed. Sub, hit the bell for the notifications, because we are officially in Core Set 2019 standard right now, and I got a bunch of decks I want to talk about. So sub if you haven't done that yet, and follow me on Twitter at SBMTGDev, again, if you feel like it. And if you got an extra $1 in your pocket just once a month, you can also sign up for the Patreon club, just be a patron, $1 a month, all I ask. And if you do sign up for $1 a month, not only will I let you know what decks we're doing 24 hours before I upload them, but I'll also let you participate in all these polls to where you can vote on what decks we're doing next to begin with. So if any of that sounds cool to you, just throw $1 a month in my face, and I'll give you some information. That's a good deal. And if you want to do that, there's a link in the description for that as well. But even if you don't, I'm just glad that you're here. I appreciate that you're enjoying the content. But I'm pretty sure I'm tapped out for now. Let me know how you felt about this one down there in the comments section, how you'd build it different and all that stuff. I'm all ears. It's your turn now. But I'm pretty sure that that is it, you guys. I am going to catch you cats later. I'm Dev from The Place. Thanks for watching, my wizards. Spread love and be kind.